And welcome to The Bottom Line, where we bring in the top business experts to break down the most pressing issues of the day. The transition to carbon neutrality, green and renewable energy, these are all part of a narrative the EU is wildly focused on, not always addressing the real impact on private citizens. I am now joined by Dr. Sonia Buchholtz from Forum Energii, a European interdisciplinary think tank from Poland that specializes in energy transition, to discuss the government's latest announcements regarding Poland's stance on the details of the EU Green Deal. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
So just a reminder to our viewers, the ETS2 scheme is a second emissions trading system that complements the original ETS that addresses carbon dioxide emissions from fuel combustion in buildings, road, transport and additional sectors. So the implementation of this is supported by the EU Social Climate Fund. And I wanted to begin our conversation with the ETS2 scheme that is going online in 2027 and subsequently equates to new costs for consumers. And we hear that the Polish government is now afraid of the backlash and is trying to soften the blow. What do you think can be done to avoid this?
Well, let us emphasize that ETS2 is going to affect mainly the single-family houses heated independently with coal and gas. So it means approximately 5.5 million houses, but their number should decrease. And at the same time, ETS2 won't affect block of flats inhabitants who use district heating from large CHPs or heat pumps users, as they are already covered by the ETS1. And back to your question, what can be done? Well, within the existing frameworks, at least regarding buildings, I guess thermal renovation. This is tough, but rewarding measure as it decreases the demand for energy. And typically the next step is replacing a heat source with something that is more efficient and maybe more renewable based. And this should make households resilient to any price hikes in the future, regardless of the source, whether it comes from due to political reasons or because of the ETS scheme. And such renovations are currently supported by the states under the Cleaner program. While it might be difficult to upgrade 5 million houses, government might be interested in postponing implementation of the ETS2 mechanism, which for now is not foreseen. And finally, there is a nuclear option. So to replace the ETS2 mechanism with other tool. I guess we are discussing the tool that will combine the implementation of polluter pays principle with something that offers more just distribution, especially in the context of purchasing power.
Well, you sound very positive, understandably, about the scheme, but as I understand, the average Polish family that heats their home with gas will have to pay a total of 6.3 thousand zloty, additional 6.3 thousand zloty in the space of 2027 and 2030. And in the years between 2027 and 2035, a total of 24,000 zloty extra. So for that kind of family, I think those figures would be quite overwhelming. What would you say to a family that would be faced with those kind of figures?
This is the assumption that nothing is changing, so the business as usual scenario. And what we expected is that this thermal renovation takes place this way or another, regardless of ETS or not, because basically for many houses it is necessary. And another issue is that we should take into account the overall energy demand. So it is very the hot topic for the government as well to reduce the energy supply, the import of energy, the fuels from imported fuels. So this is the thing that will be definitely a priority for the government, and this is why the Clean Air program is implemented. And finally, we should take into account that the availability of Polish coal will decrease. So it means coal won't be a fuel as popular as right now it is, also because of its availability.
Okay, so Polish minister in charge of EU funds, Katarzyna Pełczyńska-Nałęcz, she suggests two things: lowering the initial price per ton of emitted CO2 and then the gradual price increase over the next decade. So this is allegedly supposed to soften the blow. How effective and strategic an approach do you think this is?
This is a take on replacing the ETS mechanism, and it assumes that this pollutant pays rule is binding, but this proposal has two important features. So first of all, it is adjusted to the purchasing power of those heavily dependent from fossil fuels, just like Polish households. There is an assumption that these kind of households should still be able to invest in cleaner technologies. And if the burden is too high, no money is left for investment. So with insufficient decarbonization, the price of allowance remains very high, and this would be a vicious circle. And the second feature is that the future price should be known in advance, and this cannot be offered in the case of ETS2. And this price known in advance is a tool that creates the incentive to invest. So it is clear what the benefit of thermal renovation is.
Okay, so working on that assumption, we also know that Poland will be the biggest beneficiary of the Social Climate Fund. We know that Poland is supposed to receive almost 50 billion zloty, and this is a big pot of money that is intended to assist the transition to greener heating. And EU governments were supposed to introduce action plans that will present how this money will be spent. How do you think Poland should spend this money?
Well, we know that government needs to prepare a plan how they will solve the problem of energy poverty permanently to receive the money. And we also know the general rules of this plan. So up to 37% of the fund might be spent on social transfers, but they still need to be justified with the maybe more it needs to be justified with the whole plan of reducing this energy poverty. But further on, the specific distribution between heating and transport is subject to government choice. So it will vary from one country to another depending on the local context. We should spend the money on thermal renovation because it relieves household budgets permanently, but it also increases the energy security and on increasing availability and affordability of transport, including public transport. Noteworthy, the fund may support only those who became energy impoverished due to ETS2 implementation. So it is not designed to support middle class, but to the most impoverished people. Thus, there should be a wider concept of blended financing from various sources to cover all the challenges that Poland currently experiences.
And based on what you've just shared with us now, do you think that this will actually solve the problems that those families that are most impoverished, especially in the face of this green transition, will it solve their problems? And we also hear that actually it's not just those, the lower middle classes or perhaps the ones that suffer, that are actually the poor families in Poland, but also the middle classes that are allegedly supposed to suffer in the face of this green transition. Will this fund actually solve these problems?
Well, they may suffer unless nothing is being done. So I guess this is a right way to motivate the government to intensify the efforts regarding the thermal renovation programs. So not only to replace the heat source, but also to reduce the demand for energy. But at the same time, we know it won't be sufficient. And also there is an issue of providing the supply of materials and people who would be competent to implement all those changes in, for example, in construction. So it means that the challenge is maybe more complex, but the designing these social climate plans is a necessary step to find out where are the most important barriers, how to solve them, how to think about the greening the household sector, the building sector, in a way that will make these people in the long term less prone to some price hikes.
Indeed. And one last question, a brief answer from you. There has been an ongoing debate that the ETS is eroding the competitiveness of European businesses, and now they will have to pay even more because of the increase in fuel prices. What is your take on that? Very briefly.
Competitiveness is really a hot topic because Europe competes with the US and Chinese, and keeping in mind the population aging, high energy prices, it is no longer possible to be cost competitive. And this was the case of Poland because Poland has energy intensive branches overrepresented, the small companies who are often suppliers for multinationals. So carbon footprint measure will further worsen their position unless energy efficiency and renewable energy sources become a priority also from the perspective of business.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us. That was Dr. Sonia Buchholtz from Forum Energii with us here on The Bottom Line. And that brings us to the end of today's edition of Business Arena. I was your host, Marie Cato. Make sure you join us again on Monday at 5:10 here on TVP World. Goodbye.